At a baseball game, Gwen cheers on her brother Finney as he pitches. The batter, Bruce, swings and misses twice before launching a home run, sealing the win. After the game, Bruce compliments Finney's pitching, calling his arm mint. Later, as Bruce rides his bike home, he slows down when he notices a black van parked nearby. A few days later, during breakfast, Finney quietly eats while his father, Terrence, complains about his slurping. Gwen accidentally drops the bread keeper lid and quickly apologizes. On their way to school, Finney notices a missing person flyer featuring Bruce. As they continue, they stumble upon Robin fighting a bully moose. Robin easily overpowers him while students cheer. Gwen admires Robin, calling him the toughest kid in school since the grabber took their previous bully, Vance. Uncomfortable discussing the grabber, Finney tries to change the subject, but Gwen reassures him that the rumor about kids disappearing after saying his name isn't true. In science class, Finney twirls his rocket ship pen while stealing glances at his crush, Donna. After class, bullies Buzz, Matt, and Maddie corner him in the restroom, but Robin intervenes, scaring them off. Before leaving, Robin advises Finney to stand up for himself, then asks for help with math, complaining that their teacher talks too fast. Meanwhile, Gwen is called to the principal's office, where detectives Wright and Miller ask about her dream of Bruce's abduction. When they reveal that black balloons were found at the crime scenes, details never made public, Gwen hesitates before admitting that sometimes her dreams come true. After school, Gwen stays at a friend's house while Finney tidies up after his passed-out father. He settles in with ice cream and a scary movie until he drifts off. The next morning, Finney is jolted awake by Gwen's screams as Terrence, furious that police question him at work, whips her with a belt. She threatens to smash his liquor bottle, but when she follows through, he strikes her again. Through tears, Gwen listens as he forces her to admit her dreams mean nothing. Finney kneels beside her as she sobs. Elsewhere, Robin notices a man stepping out of a black van. That night, news of his disappearance spreads. Gwen sympathizes with Finney, knowing how much he worries about his friend. He asks if she can dream about Robin, but she reminds him she has no control over her visions. Still, she prays for a clue for pretending to be asleep when Terrence quietly tells her he loves her. Days later, without Robin, Finney is left defenseless. Bullies gang up on him after school, delivering a brutal beating. Gwen rushes in, hurling a rock at Maddie before trying to fight Buzz, but he knocks her down and continues the attack on Finney. During science class, students pair up for an assignment, leaving Finney without a partner until Donna steps forward. After school, Gwen teases Finney about Donna before heading off to her friend's house. Walking home alone, Finney notices a man stumbling out of a black van, dropping groceries. Offering to help, Finney approaches as the man introduces himself as a magician. When Finney sees black balloons inside the van, the magician suddenly traps him. Finney fights back, stabbing him with his pen, but the man sprays something into his mouth, rendering him weak before dragging him inside. Finney wakes up in a dimly lit basement. The kidnapper, now revealed as the grabber, complains about his wounded arm but assures Finney he won't hurt him further. Suddenly, a phone rings. The grabber tells Finney he'll explain later and locks the door behind him. Alone, Finney desperately searches for a way out but finds only a toilet and a black phone on the wall. When he picks it up, there's no dial tone. Meanwhile, Gwen gets a frantic call from Terrence, realizing something terrible has happened. She dashes out in a panic. That night, the authorities are alerted about Finney's disappearance. Gwen prays for his safe return. Back in captivity, Finney jolts awake to the phone ringing. He picks it up, but the grabber, standing nearby, tells him it hasn't worked in years. He then claims he'll take Finney home soon, but has something to take care of first. Terrified, Finney assumes the grabber fears getting caught and promises to stay quiet if released. The grabber chuckles, assuring him it's not about the police. Realizing someone else might be in the house, Finney threatens to scream, but the grabber dismisses the idea, saying he won't hear anything with the door shut, leaving Finney to wonder who he is. Alone, Finney cries for help, but the soundproof walls absorb his screams. He tries reaching the window, but it's too high. Suddenly, the phone rings. He picks up. Silence. Later that night, a faint creaking noise startles him. His eyes snap open to find the grabber watching him in the darkness. Nervously, Finney asks for food, but the man refuses. It's not time yet. When Finney demands answers, the grabber simply admits he wanted to look at him. The next morning, the phone rings again. This time, a boy's voice calls him by name. Horrified, Finney slams the receiver down, but it rings again. The voice pleads with him not to hang up. The boy admits he can't remember his own name. It was the first thing he lost after dying. However, he insists they've met before, then cryptically says, "Your arm was mint." The realization hits Finney. The voice belongs to Bruce. Bruce explains the phone rang for all of them, but only Finney ever answered. The grabber hears it too, but refuses to believe it's real. Bruce then instructs Finney to find a loose floor tile leading to a dirt tunnel. Meanwhile, Gwen dreams of Bruce's life before suddenly seeing Finney trapped and screaming inside a house. Determined, she sneaks out, hoping to find the location from her vision. Back in the basement, Finney locates the tile and starts digging, flushing dirt down the toilet to hide his progress. The next day, the grabber brings him breakfast but forgets to lock the door. As Finney moves toward the exit, the phone rings. A different voice urgently warns him. It's a trap. Nearby, the ghost of Billy appears, unseen by Finney. Billy explains the grabber is waiting upstairs, ready to punish him for trying to escape, just like the others before him. After the call, Finney hesitates, then cautiously climbs the stairs. Sensing danger, he stops short and silently retreats, deciding to eat instead. Later, Billy calls again, but insists he's no longer Billy. As his voice becomes frantic, Finney notices his soda bottle rattling. Billy directs his attention to a crack in the wall, revealing a loose cable he once tore free. When Finney asks how to use it, the bottle tips toward the window. Meanwhile, Gwen dreams of Billy delivering newspapers before he was taken. Back in captivity, Finney loops the cable around the window bars, using a carpet for leverage. He climbs up, attempting to pry them free. Just as hope flickers, the bars snap, sending him crashing to the floor. That evening, Gwen hesitantly asks Terrence about their mother's dreams. Sober and distant, he recalls how they consumed her, leading her down a dark path, one that ended in tragedy. Fearful Gwen might share the same fate, he insists her dreams mean nothing. But deep down, Gwen knows they hold the key to finding Finney. Terrence has a change of heart and decides to help Gwen search for the house from her dreams, hoping it will lead them to his missing son. Meanwhile, the police visit Max's home to question him about the missing boy. Instead of being defensive, Max welcomes them in, revealing that he, too, has been investigating the kidnappings. He rambles about how the children were taken on their way home from school, except for Robin, who was abducted on a Saturday afternoon. Max insists that the kidnapper must have both a house and a garage to move the children without being seen. He even points to the general area where he believes the abductor lives, but detectives Miller and Wright seem unimpressed and focus on questioning him instead. In response, Max explains that he recently moved to town and is staying at his brother's house. After they go, Max snorts the substance, completely unaware that just beneath him, Finney remains trapped in the basement. Later, the grabber arrives with food and asks for Finney's name. He usually learns his victims' names from the newspaper, but something about this situation feels different. Finney lies, but the grabber immediately exposes the deception by tossing him a newspaper with his real name printed on it. The grabber cryptically claims that he might have let Finney go, then exits, leaving the door unlocked once again. Before Finney can act, the phone rings, but no one speaks on the other end. Upstairs, the grabber struggles to stay awake, waiting for Finney to make a move. Instead of escaping, Finney gathers the spilled food and eats before falling asleep. Sometime later, he wakes up to the unsettling sound of dripping. Investigating, he discovers a corpse suspended in midair, blood dripping onto the floor. The ghostly figure points to the phone, prompting Finney to answer it. This time, a new voice speaks. It's Griffin, one of the grabber's past victims. Griffin warns Finney that the grabber has stopped sleeping. Worried that his brother might figure out the truth, he laments that in life, no one noticed him, but in death, his name is now known. When Finney asks why he hasn't been killed yet, Griffin explains that the grabber is waiting for him to play a twisted game before moving on to the next phase. He also reveals that the storm door is secured with a lock, the same bike lock Griffin once owned. Though he can't recall the combination, he carved it into the wall before he died. Finney searches for the numbers and sneaks upstairs, finding the grabber asleep in the kitchen. He carefully unlocks the door, only for a dog to start barking, waking the grabber. Panicked, Finney bolts for the exit, but the grabber chases him down in his van. Before Finney can escape, the man cuts him off and tackles him. As porch lights flicker on, the grabber threatens to kill him if he makes a sound. When the lights go out, he knocks Finney unconscious and drags him back inside. The next morning, Gwen wakes up frustrated. No dreams came to her that night and doubt creeps in. Meanwhile, Finney wakes to another phone call. The voice belongs to Vance, a former school bully. As he speaks, Gwen dreams of the day Vance was arrested, but hears his conversation with Finney through the black phone. In her vision, she spots a house number before waking up. Vance explains there's a storage room behind one wall, but a freezer blocks the way. Finney needs to break through, crawl inside, and escape. When Finney thanks him, Vance snarls, "It's not kindness, it's revenge." His rage shakes the room, shattering a bottle nearby. Finney follows Vance's instructions, eventually reaching the freezer, but the door is locked from the outside. Exhausted and defeated, he breaks down until the phone rings again. This time it's Robin. Refusing to let Finney give up, he calls him a fighter, reminding him how to throw a punch. He instructs Finney to fill the phone receiver with dirt to use as a weapon and warns this is the final call. Before hanging up, they share a heartfelt farewell. Determined, Finney follows Robin's advice, setting up a tripwire with a cable. Meanwhile, Gwen continues searching. Suddenly, she sees the spirits of the grabber's victims and crashes her bike, stopping in front of the house from her dreams. Rushing home, she contacts the detectives. At the same time, Max pieces together that his brother's house fits within the grabber's suspected hideout area. In the basement, Finney hears the phone receiver shift on its own. Then the lights flicker. Bracing himself, he grips the phone. But instead of the grabber, Max enters, stunned to find Finney. Before he can react, the grabber appears and swings an axe, killing him. Just then, detectives arrive and find Gwen waiting outside. As they search, the grabber corners Finney in rage over his brother's death. Retrieving his axe, he calls his snarling dog and prepares to strike. Meanwhile, the police storm the house across the street, only to find it empty. The grabber swings, but Finney dodges and bolts. As the grabber chases him, Finney pulls the tripwire, sending him crashing into the hole he dug earlier. The grabber's ankle shatters. Seizing the moment, Finney beats him with the phone. The grabber latches onto him in a chokehold, but Finney rips off his mask, causing him to panic. Taking advantage, Finney strangles him with the phone cord. The phone rings one last time. Finney presses it to the grabber's ear as the voices of his past victims mock him. With one final pull, Finney snaps his neck. Using meat from the freezer, Finney distracts the dog and escapes. At the same time, an officer finds a hidden basement door in the other house, uncovering the grabber's burial site. Finney steps outside, spotting Gwen across the street. Overcome with relief, she rushes to hug him. Moments later, the police surround them. Terrence arrives, overcome with guilt, begging for forgiveness. Though everything isn't okay, the siblings find comfort in being together again. Later, Detective Wright confirms the grabber owned both houses, one for captivity, the other for disposal. Days pass. Back at school, Finney, once bullied, now commands quiet respect. Feeling stronger than ever, he takes his seat in science class beside Donna, ready to move forward.